right, let's dive in. We're heading into the world of Greyhawk for D&D today. Specifically, we're looking at Joseph Bloch's Greyhawk Campaign Guide from DMsGuild, and plus a fantastic review from 3 Orcs to guide us even further.
Love 3 Orcs. This guide is a great resource, especially for DMs who are maybe new to Greyhawk. It's not like a pre-made adventure, more like a toolbox.
You've got it. Maps, lore, inspiration, all those good things. Like a framework for your Greyhawk adventures. And, you know, it has that old school D&D vibe.
It does. But it's still very usable for players who are more into modern playstyles, you know? Kind of bridges the gap. And one of the first things it tackles is this idea of the flow of history, which is super important for setting up your campaign.
Okay, flow of history. I like it. So what's the big decision a DM has to make here?
Well, you have to decide how much you want your players to be involved in the big historical events of Greyhawk.
Oh, I see. So, like, do they become major players, maybe even changing the established canon?
Exactly. Or do those big events just sort of happen in the background while they're doing their own thing?
That's a tough choice.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, having my players be the reason EUs doesn't conquer the Horn Society sounds pretty epic.
Right.
But then a more personal campaign might be more appealing to some players.
That's it. It really comes down to what kind of story you and your players want to tell. Excellent.
So what's really cool about this guide is it's not just like a rehash of, you know, the old stuff.
No, it's not. It's not a rehash.
It kind of bridges that gap between that old school Greyhawk feel and how people, you know, are playing D&D these days.
I think it does a great job of that. It really tries to capture the essence of classic Greyhawk while also making it accessible to, you know, modern players and DMs.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, a tricky balance to strike. But I think, you know, this book does a great job of it.
So by the end of this, you'll have all the knowledge and the inspiration to launch an amazing Greyhawk campaign.
Absolutely. You will have the tools you need.
But first, you know why Greyhawk?
Yeah. Why Greyhawk?
What makes it so special?
Well, Greyhawk's kind of a legend, right? I mean, it's one of the oldest D&D settings.
For sure.
Full of rich lore and, you know, these iconic characters. But what I think really makes it stand out is the freedom it gives you as a dungeon master.
Yes.
And this guide really emphasizes that. It gives you a framework, but you get to build on it. You can make it your own.
Yeah, it's like they're handing you a world with this super fascinating history, but they're like, here are the keys.
Go wild.
Go make some history of your own.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of history, the guide mentions some really interesting choices you can make about handling time in your campaign and, you know, especially those big canonical events.
Right, because the Flanaess is a living, breathing world, right? It changes over time.
It does, yeah.
So choosing a campaign year is crucial.
Uh-huh.
You know, like, for example, if you choose 576 CY,
right,
you're basically diving into a Flanaess that's on the brink of war.
Oh, wow.
But the guide goes even further than that. It actually offers 2 really distinct ways to kind of, you know, integrate the canon into your game.
So it's not just about picking a year. It's about how your players actually, you know, interact with those big events.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's about how they experience those events.
Okay.
So option 1 is basically letting your players be right in the center of those pivotal moments.
Okay.
You know, imagine your players actually stopping Omus from crushing the Horn Society.
Wow.
That's a campaign where their actions are literally going to change the course of history.
That's high stakes D&D.
It is.
But what if I prefer something a little more grounded?
Yeah.
You know, where the world's fate isn't, you know, resting on every single decision my players make.
Right. So the guide also offers the second option, weaving those big events into the background of your campaign.
Okay, yeah.
So they still happen, right? They're still shaping the world, but your players are experiencing the ripples of those events.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily the tidal wave.
Right.
And this approach lets you use that established lore for context and plot hooks without forcing your players into that kind of chosen one role.
Right. So much flexibility.
There is.
It's like choose your own adventure style.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of a world on the edge, you mentioned 576 CY.
Yes.
Being particularly volatile. Why is that?
Well, 576 CY, it's a powder keg.
Okay.
You've got the Great Kingdom. It's crumbling under its own weight, riddled with corruption.
Oh, wow.
You've got the Bandit Kingdoms. They're always a threat. But now they've got this new leader who's got ambitions beyond just banditry.
And then there's Eus, the demigod. He's always a looming menace in the north.
Right.
You know, he's always scheming, always looking for a way to expand his power.
So, okay, paint a clearer picture for me.
Okay.
Which of these power struggles is, the most likely to suck my players into the thick of things?
Well, let's take the Shildamar Valley, for example.
Okay.
On one side, you've got the theocracy of the Pale.
Yeah.
They're trying to establish order through their strict laws. Some might even say they're a little harsh.
Okay.
And then on the other side, you have the Hold of the Sea Princes. These are former pirates who have turned rulers.
Wow.
They're struggling to maintain their newfound power. They're facing threats from all sides.
So it's a clash of ideologies.
It is.
As much as it is, a struggle for land, it's lawful order
Yes.
versus chaotic freedom right in my player's backyard.
Exactly. It's a conflict that's just waiting to explode. And that's just one example. I mean, there are tons of conflicts brewing in the Flanaess, each with the potential to draw your players in. And, to make things even more interesting.
Yeah.
The guide introduces a surprising twist technology.
Technology.
I know, right?
I thought this was classic fantasy.
Oh, you did?
Swords and sorcery stuff?
Well, it is, but with a twist.
Okay.
You see, Earth, the world of Greyhawk, it has a history that goes back further than most D&D settings.
Okay.
There are these remnants of advanced civilizations, lost empires that achieved these incredible technological marvels.
So we're talking like spaceships and lasers?
No, not quite.
Right.
But the guide does hint at, ancient artifacts that blend magic and technology. Think of a magical sword that was forged in a furnace powered by some long-lost energy source.
Right.
Or a city that's protected by magical wards.
Wow.
That are powered by a combination of arcane runes and something akin to a power grid.
Okay.
Something like that.
That adds a whole new layer to the setting.
It does.
But, gunpowder is like a pretty standard part of D&D technology.
It is. That's true.
Right.
It is.
So how does that work?
Well, here's where things get really unique. See, the guide states that gunpowder doesn't work in Earth's atmosphere.
Why?
Except in one very specific location.
Really?
Yeah. So this means no cannons, no firearms. So while technology does exist, it's rare, it's often magical in nature,
Okay.
and it never overshadows that sword and sorcery feel.
That's a really clever way to, keep the setting fresh without going full steampunk on it.
It's a way to introduce those elements without completely changing the tone and feel of the setting.
Right. So we've got this world. It's on the edge, full of political intrigue, ancient secrets, and a touch of sci-fi.
It is.
Where do we even begin to unpack all the locations and factions?
Well, the guide does a fantastic job of providing an overview of the entire Flanaess. It breaks it down region by region. But for today, I think, why don't we focus on a few places that really capture the essence of Greyhawk?
Perfect. I'm ready to be transported
Okay.
to this incredible world.
All right.
Where are we headed first?
Well, let's start with the free city of Greyhawk itself.
Oh, okay.
The setting's namesake.
Right.
It's this sprawling metropolis, a hub of trade, intrigue, and all sorts of interesting characters. And it's got this very specific law that I think is sure to spark some creative role-playing. No magic can be used to solve capital crime.
Oh, that's interesting. So no, truth serums
No.
or magical lie detectors in court?
Nope.
Wow.
It forces investigators to rely on traditional methods, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and just using their wits to uncover the truth.
So it creates this tension between, the power of magic and the limits of its use in a society, that's striving for justice.
Yeah. It raises all these interesting questions about, the role of magic in society.
It's like a magical version of a gritty detective story.
I love that. It is.
And what other fascinating locales await us in this deep dive?
Well, if you're looking for mystery and maybe a touch of the ominous, there's the Valley of the Mage.
Oh, yeah.
The guide describes it as a place where no one comes out. Wow. It's a haven for this powerful and reclusive mage.
Wow.
And the rumors surrounding the valley are as varied as they are unsettling.
I'm already hooked. A valley full of secrets, maybe even a few dangers. Sounds like the perfect place for an adventurous party to get into trouble.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What other locations have piqued your interest?
How about Selene?
Okay.
The Elven Kingdom. It's this hidden realm of ancient forests and, timeless beauty.
Beautiful.
It's ruled by a council of elves who value peace and harmony above all else. And the guide mentions that that they celebrate these lavish revels under the full moons at midsummer.
Oh, wow.
A spectacle that sounds truly magical.
That's such a stark contrast to, all the turmoil that we've been talking about.
Right.
It's like stepping into a completely different world.
Exactly.
And finally, let's not forget about the Palm Arch.
Ah, the Palm Arch.
A land that has undergone a dramatic transformation.
Yes, it has.
So the Palm Arch was once this prosperous human kingdom.
It was known for its fertile lands and its thriving cities. But then came the invasion. A horde of humanoids swept through the region, conquering cities, enslaving the populace, and establishing their own brutal rule.
So it's a land that's scarred by war.
It is.
And conflict.
Yes.
With a very different feel from the rest of the Flanaess.
It does, yeah. It has a much darker, more savage feel to it.
Yeah.
It's a place where danger lurks around every corner. And the guide hints that there are still pockets of human resistance.
Oh, really?
Fighting to reclaim their lost homeland.
Wow.
So it's a region ripe with opportunities for adventure, from rescuing captives to uncovering lost artifacts, maybe even helping to restore a fallen kingdom.
Each of these locations offers a unique flavor, a different facet of the Greyhawk setting, from the bustling city streets to the hidden elven kingdom to the war-torn lands of the Palm Arch.
Yeah.
It's a world full of contrasts and possibilities.
It is. It's a world that has something to offer everyone, and that's what makes it so exciting as a setting for D&D.
And we haven't even, touched on the guide's exploration of Earth's cosmology, which is full of its own unique quirks and surprises.
Oh, yes. We can't forget about the cosmology. That's a whole other deep dive in itself.
Okay. Well, I am definitely intrigued. Let's take a deeper dive into that cosmology. We'll uncover the secrets of Earth's planes of existence, its strange planets, and maybe even a few cosmic horrors.
Lots of adventure potential there.
For sure. What are some of your favorites?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the White Plume Mountain.
Oh, yeah. A classic.
Not only is it visually stunning, but it also has ties to some of the best D&D modules ever published.
So you could easily incorporate those classic adventures into your campaign.
You could. Or you could just use the mountain as inspiration for something totally new.
So many options. The White Plume Mountain's definitely going on my list of places to explore in Greyhawk. What else? Any other locations that jump out at you?
Well, for those who like to delve into the darker side of Greyhawk, you've got the Soul Husk Caverns in Iaz.
Oh, that sounds ominous.
It is. The guide only hints at what's down there, but the rumors of stolen souls and dark rituals are more than enough to get your imagination going.
Stolen souls, dark rituals. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Right. And those are just two examples. The guide is packed with cool locations that are just begging to be explored.
Any other essential points you want to highlight before we move on?
Yes, absolutely. It's so important to remember that this guide is incredibly detailed, but it's not supposed to be a straitjacket. The best Greyhawk campaigns are the ones that take this foundation and add their own personal touches. Embrace the spirit of the setting, but make it your own.
And we're back, still digging into Greyhawk with the help of Joseph Bloch's Greyhawk Campaign Guide.
It's amazing how this guide manages to be both like a history book and a practical guide. It's not just telling us about Greyhawk, it's showing us how to actually use it. From the setting's history to some of its most captivating locations. But now I think maybe we should shift gears a little bit and talk about the actual process of running a campaign in Greyhawk using this new guide.
That's right. We've kind of explored the what of Greyhawk, but now let's get into the how.
Exactly, the how.
How can you, as a DM, take all this amazing information and actually turn it into, a really compelling campaign for your players?
Well, the guide is really good about this. It emphasizes player choice. It stresses the importance of giving your players agency, letting their decisions shape the world around them.
That makes sense. I mean, Greyhawk is known for, its reactive world.
Yes.
Where actions have consequences.
What you do matters in Greyhawk. Your choices have ripple effects. The guide actually encourages you to think about how, how the player's actions might ripple outwards, affecting the political landscape.
Oh, wow.
The balance of power, even the fate of, entire nations. It's a chance to create a truly dynamic and engaging campaign world.
Okay, but where do we even begin?
Yeah.
There's so much to work with in Greyhawk.
I know, there is. There's a lot. One of the first things that the guide recommends
Yeah.
is choosing a focus for your campaign. What aspects of Greyhawk are you most excited about?
Oh, okay.
Is it the political intrigue of the Great Kingdom?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the clash of civilizations in the Sheldamar Valley? Or maybe the exploration of ancient ruins and planar gateways?
Right. So many choices. It's like,
It is.
it's like choosing a lens through which to view the world. And once you have that focus,
Yeah.
everything else kind of starts to fall into place.
Exactly. Yeah. It helps you narrow down the possibilities, create a more cohesive and engaging narrative. Like, for instance, if your focus is the political intrigue of the Great Kingdom,
Right.
you might spend more time developing the various factions,
Yes.
motivations, their schemes.
Okay.
You might create opportunities for your players to get involved in, courtly intrigue, espionage, maybe even assassination plots.
And if the focus is more on exploration and discovery, you might emphasize like the wilder regions of the Flanaess, the ancient ruins, the hidden
Yeah.
dungeons, the planar gateways.
Exactly. The focus helps you tailor the campaign to your interests
Right.
and the interests of your players. And speaking of tailoring, the guide also talks about the importance of choosing a theme and a tone for your campaign.
So it's not just about like what happens in the story.
No.
It's also about how it's told.
Exactly. The tone and the mood. Do you want a gritty, war-torn campaign where survival is a constant struggle
Wow.
and every decision has like life or death consequences?
Right, right.
Or maybe you want something more lighthearted.
Sure.
A swashbuckling adventure filled with daring heists, witty banter, colorful characters. I mean, Greyhawk can accommodate a wide range of tones and play styles.
Like having a toolbox full of like different genres and moods.
Yeah, you get to choose the tools that that best fit the story you want to tell.
But how do we make sure that, the campaign still feels uniquely Greyhawk?
That's where all those specific details that we talked about earlier
Yeah.
really come in.
Okay.
The guide encourages you to sprinkle your campaign
Yeah.
with those little touches that really bring the setting to life. Like, for example, remember our discussion about Selim
Oh, yeah.
and those midsummer revels?
Yes.
Wow.
The Elven Kingdom with those magical moonlit...
Exactly. Imagine your players
Yeah.
receiving an invitation to attend those revels.
Wow.
A chance to experience elven culture firsthand, maybe even encounter some high-ranking elven nobles, or maybe uncover a plot that threatens the kingdom's peace.
That's a great opportunity for, like, a side quest. I mean, it's
Well-
a whole arc.
It is. It's not just about fighting monsters and gathering loot.
Oh.
It's about immersing your players in a world that feels real and vibrant.
It's about the experience.
Yeah.
And a guide is packed with those details, from unique cultural customs
Yes.
to intriguing laws and legends to hints of, ancient secrets just waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of material
There's not.
to draw from.
No.
Speaking of ancient secrets, a Greyhawk campaign
Yeah,
can be pretty dangerous, right?
it can be. It can be.
How does the guide suggest, handling encounters
Yeah.
with monsters and other threats?
Well, it encourages DMs to think beyond the standard monster manual.
Okay.
While classic creatures like goblins and orcs and dragons are certainly present in Greyhawk,
Of course, of course.
there are also a lot of unique and terrifying foes that are specific to the setting.
So what are we talking about here?
Well, for example, there are
Yeah.
the Pomarge giants.
Right.
You mentioned those earlier.
Uh-huh.
These are hulking brutes.
Okay.
Warped by the chaotic energies of their homeland. And they're not just big and strong.
Right.
They're cunning. They're brutal. They often employ these really cruel tactics.
Oh, wow.
And they just revel in the suffering of their enemies.
That's a nice twist on, a familiar creature.
It is.
What about the magical side of things?
Yeah.
Greyhawk has always been known for its powerful wizards.
Oh, absolutely. Magic is an integral part of the setting. The guide actually highlights different schools of magic.
Okay.
From the scholarly traditions of the Great Kingdom to the primal,
Yeah.
nature-infused magic of the druids and rangers.
Okay.
And it also touches on that blend of magic and technology.
Right. Those ancient artifacts
Yes.
that combine arcane power with some lost form of technology.
Is that-
How can DMs, how can they use those? Create like really memorable encounters or challenges?
Well, imagine this. Your players discover a hidden chamber in an ancient ruin.
Oh, okay.
Inside, they find this device that seems to be a combination of a magical staff and some kind of intricate clockwork mechanism.
Ooh, that's cool.
Right.
What does it do?
Well, that's up to you. It could be a weapon that fires bolts of pure energy. It could be a tool that manipulates time or space.
Wow.
Or even a key that unlocks a portal to another plane of existence.
Speaking of other planes, we haven't really talked about Greyhawk's cosmology yet.
No, we haven't.
And it's supposed to be pretty different
It is.
from the standard D&D multiverse.
It is. It is quite different. The guide actually delves into the various planes of existence that are connected to Earth.
Okay.
And it highlights some key differences. For example, the Feywild, that realm of fairy magic and wild nature, it's largely inaccessible from Greyhawk.
So no quick trips to the Feywild for like a whimsical side quest.
Not really, no.
Why is that?
Well, the guide explains that the boundaries between the material plane and the Feywild, they're particularly strong in Greyhawk, making travel between the two realms extremely difficult.
That's interesting.
It is.
It makes the Feywild feel
even more mysterious and otherworldly.
It does. It does. What about the other planes? Are they more accessible?
Yeah.
Well, the guide states that the elemental planes, fire, water, earth, and air,
right?
They're extensively charted in Greyhawk.
Oh, wow.
But it goes even further than that.
Okay.
It describes para-elemental planes like ooze and magma.
Oh, wow.
And even quasi-elemental planes like steam and dust.
Wow, that's a lot of planes.
It is.
How can DMs use them? Create, interesting encounters or challenges?
Well, instead of just sending your players on a generic quest to the plane of fire.
Oh, okay.
You could have them explore a volcanic region on the plane of magma where they might encounter creatures made of molten rock.
Oh, wow.
Or have to navigate these treacherous lava flows. Or you could send them to the plane of dust where they have to deal with these powerful dust storms, navigate a labyrinth of canyons carved by wind erosion.
That's a really cool visual.
It is.
Yeah.
Or encounter creatures that, that thrive in that really harsh environment.
Those are some great examples.
Thank you.
It's like taking the familiar and twisting it just enough to make it feel fresh and exciting.
Exactly. It's about taking those familiar concepts and giving them a unique Greyhawk spin.
Right.
And speaking of twisting the familiar, the guide also mentions a plane of shadow.
Oh.
That's unique to Greyhawk.
The plane of shadow.
Yes. It's this dark and dangerous realm.
Okay.
Inhabited by, creatures of shadow and nightmares.
Wow.
It's a place where light is scarce and shadows hold power.
That sounds perfect for like a horror-themed campaign.
Yes.
Or even just a creepy side quest.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges might players face in the plane of shadow?
Well, shadow creatures, they're not only, physically dangerous, but they can also, they can drain the very life force from their victim, leaving them weakened and vulnerable. And the environment itself is treacherous, full of shifting landscapes, illusions, traps.
It sounds like a truly terrifying place.
Well, it is.
And to make things even more interesting, the guide mentions, portals to demiplanes.
Yes.
And even other worlds scattered throughout Earth.
That's right.
So these portals, they offer opportunities for your players.
They do.
To explore realms.
Yes.
Beyond their wildest imaginations.
They might stumble upon a portal that leads to a jungle-covered demiplane ruled by dinosaurs.
Wow.
Or they might find themselves transported to a world where magic is outlawed and technology reigns supreme.
The possibilities they're truly endless.
They are.
But even the most, experienced adventurers need a place to rest and recuperate. They do. What about cities and towns? How does the guide suggest, fleshing those out?
Well, it encourages DMs to think about the unique character of each city and town.
Okay.
What's its history? What are its primary industries? Who holds power there?
Okay.
What are the local customs and beliefs?
It's like each city is a character in itself.
It is. And within those cities, we can create these memorable NPCs, shopkeepers, guild masters, maybe even a shady underworld figure or two.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. The guide provides a wealth of information on Greyhawk's various factions, guilds, organizations, from the Thieves Guild to the Knights of the Heart. Each group has its own motivations, goals, and potential conflicts.
So it's up to the DM to decide how those groups
It is.
interact with each other and with the player characters.
Exactly. It's like this giant game of chess where each move has repercussions across the board.
They will shape the world around them.
Absolutely. It's a living, breathing world.
That's what makes tabletop role-playing games so captivating.
It is.
The players aren't just, passive observers.
No.
They're active participants. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the political landscape to planar cosmology to the importance of player choice. Is there anything else that the guide emphasizes for running a successful Greyhawk campaign?
One final piece of advice, don't be afraid to make it your own.
Okay.
The Greyhawk campaign guide, it's an incredible resource.
Right.
But it's just a starting point. Use your imagination.
Right.
Draw inspiration from the guide's details.
Okay.
And create a Greyhawk that is uniquely yours.
Time to dig into the nitty-gritty.
Let's do it.
And uncover the specific details from the guide that really make Greyhawk come alive. We touched on some intriguing locations earlier.
We did.
What are some details that make those places so unique?
Let's start with the free city of Greyhawk.
Okay.
We mentioned that rule about using magic to solve capital crimes.
Right.
The guide actually gives a specific example of how this plays out.
Oh, I'm all ears. What's the example?
Imagine a murder in the city.
Right.
A wealthy merchant found dead, and there are multiple suspects.
Classic.
Now, in most D&D settings, a wizard could easily use a spell like detect thoughts or speak with dead.
Right. Classic way to solve a mystery.
Because you get to the bottom of things
quickly,
But in the free city, those spells are off limits.
Hey, magic.
Instead, investigators have to rely on good old-fashioned detective work. Interviewing witnesses, gathering physical evidence, piecing together clues.
That's so cool. It forces the players to think like real detectives.
It does.
And it creates opportunities for some really engaging role-playing.
Absolutely. And the guide goes even further, suggesting that this rule has led to the development of specialized guilds and organizations within the city.
Like what kind of guilds?
Well, there are guilds of forensic alchemists who can analyze poisons.
Wow.
Trace evidence.
Right.
There are guilds of skilled interrogators who can extract information, even from the most tight-lipped suspects. And there are even guilds of magical investigators who specialize in divination spells that don't violate the city's strict laws.
So it's like a whole ecosystem
Yeah, it is.
built around solving crimes without relying on the most obvious magical solutions.
Exactly. And that's just one example of how, a single specific detail can inspire an entire campaign arc or even a whole campaign setting.
Okay. What about the Valley of the Mage? What secrets are hidden in that ominous place?
Well, the guide doesn't explicitly reveal the mage's identity, but it does drop some intriguing hints. It suggests that the mage is incredibly ancient.
Oh, wow.
Possibly even a lich who has achieved a form of immortality.
Wow. So not just...
And it hints that the mage is obsessed with collecting knowledge.
Okay.
Particularly knowledge about planar travel and the nature of reality itself.
So not your average reclusive spellcaster. No.
This guy sounds like he's
on a whole other level.
Yeah.
Operating on a whole other level. Yeah. And the guide goes on to describe the valley itself as being strangely altered by the mage's magic. There are reports of twisted trees, glowing plants, and even creatures that seem to defy the laws of nature.
It's like a glimpse into the mind of a being who has transcended mortal limits.
Exactly.
What a fantastic location for a horror-themed campaign.
Oh, absolutely. Or even just a creepy side quest.
Right.
That'll leave your players questioning their sanity.
All right. Now, I'm curious about Selene. We talked about those midsummer revels. But what else makes this elven kingdom so special?
Well, the guide emphasizes Selene's deep connection nature. Its elves live in harmony with the forest.
Their lives intertwine with the rhythms of the seasons. They have this innate understanding of the natural world. And their magic is often subtle and understated.
It's a nice contrast to the more overt displays of magic that we see in other parts of Greyhawk.
Exactly. And the guide describes a specific tradition that really highlights this connection to nature. During the spring equinox, the elves of Selene perform a ritual known as the Awakening of the Trees.
What happens during this ritual?
Elven druids and priests gather in a sacred grove and use their magic to awaken the tree from their winter slumber. And the trees, they blossom with these vibrant colors.
Wow.
Their branches sway in a gentle breeze.
Okay.
And the entire forest seems to come alive with a sense of joy and renewal.
That's a beautiful image. It sounds like a
is
truly magical experience.
It's a very powerful and moving ritual, and it's just one example of the many unique and fascinating traditions that make Selene such a memorable location. And those are just a few examples of the many specific details that make Greyhawk such a rich and vibrant setting.
I can already see how I could work that into my next campaign. It's a classic for a reason, but this guide gives you so much to work with. So many ways to make it your own.
That's the beauty of it. And speaking of classic D&D elements, let's not forget about the Greyhawk Wars, a major conflict with a lot of storytelling potential.
The Greyhawk Wars. Tell me more. What were they all about?
Well, they were a series of conflicts that happened a few decades before the guide's suggested starting year, so before 576 CY. It was this tangled web of political ambitions, territorial disputes, and personal vendettas. But at the core of it all, it was a battle between good and evil.
Sounds familiar. That seems to be a recurring theme in Greyhawk's history, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's part of what makes the setting so compelling. It's this world where good and evil are constantly at odds and where the actions of individuals can really tip the scales.
It's like a constant struggle for balance.
It is. So how did these Greyhawk Wars shape the Flanaess? What kind of legacy did they leave behind?
Yeah, good question. What were the long-term effects?
Well, they definitely had a big impact on the political landscape. Borders were redrawn, old alliances crumbled, and new powers rose to prominence. The guide goes into detail about all the different factions involved, the key battles, and the final outcome of the wars.
Sounds like a goldmine for campaign ideas. Imagine my players navigating the aftermath of all that chaos, trying to make sense of the New World Order.
Exactly. Maybe they get caught between rival nations trying to broker peace or even taking advantage of the situation for their own gain. Or perhaps they're helping to rebuild a war-torn region, bringing hope back to a shattered world.
Wow, the possibilities are endless. And it's all thanks to the rich history that this guide provides. But it's not just about the big events, right? Greyhawk's history is also shaped by all the individuals who lived and fought and schemed within its borders.
You're so right. And the guide doesn't disappoint in that department. It's got a whole who's who of notable figures. Powerful wizards like Mordenkainen, cunning rogues like Rary, valiant knights like Sir Pellerod of Furiondi. They're all there.
Ooh, Mordenkainen. Now there's a legend. Tell me more about him.
Well, the guide describes him as this powerful and mysterious figure. He's known for his vast knowledge, his mastery of magic, and his commitment to keeping the world in balance. He's often seen as a force for good in Greyhawk, working behind the scenes to stop evil and protect the innocent.
So he's not just a powerful mage, he's a good guy, someone who could be an ally to my players.
He could be. Or maybe he acts as a mentor, giving them guidance and support. But someone as powerful as Mordenkainen is bound to have enemies. The guide mentions that he's clashed with figures like Euse and Vecna, who are definitely forces of darkness.
Vecna, another classic D&D baddie.
I know, right? And the fact that Mordenkainen has tangled with him says a lot about how powerful and important he is in the world of Greyhawk.
I love how this guide not only gives you the history of Greyhawk, but also populates it with these larger-than-life characters. They can become a huge part of your campaign. And they're not just names on a page. They're potential allies, enemies, or just colorful figures that your players might meet along the way.
Exactly. They add so much depth and intrigue to the setting, it makes Greyhawk feel even more real.
I'm so glad we took the time to explore all of this. I feel like I have a much better understanding of Greyhawk now. But is there anything else we should cover before we wrap up? Any other important points that DMs should keep in mind when they're using this guide?
I think the biggest takeaway is something we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive. Flexibility. The Greyhawk Campaign Guide is an amazing resource, but it's not a rule book. It's more like a toolbox full of ideas and inspiration that you can use to build your own unique Greyhawk campaign.
So it's not about sticking rigidly to the canon or following a predetermined path.
Not at all. It's about taking all this great information and making it your own, adapting it to fit your campaign and your players.
I love that. It gives you the freedom to be creative and to tell the stories you want to tell. And that's why I think it's such a great resource for any DM. It's not just a guide to Greyhawk, it's a guide to becoming a better storyteller.
It really is. And that's a journey that never ends, you know? There's always more to learn, more to discover, and more stories to tell.
Did you enjoy video? Consider tossing support on my Patreon. It's best way to support orcs. If you would like to see more content, subscribe and post comments below. It better not be bad.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our Greyhawk deep dive, I encourage everyone listening to grab a copy of the Greyhawk campaign guide, dig in, and see what amazing stories you can create.
Don't be afraid to try new things. Push the boundaries, make Greyhawk your own. Who knows? Maybe your Greyhawk campaign will become legendary.
Until next time, keep those dice rolling and those imaginations fired up.